Okay, here we look at part 6 again of this realhistoryww.com and their racist site that misleads a bunch of people and tries to get you to believe, at least on a few of his pages, he's kind of confused on a few of his things, but at least on a few of his pages, that all Caucasians are somehow albino Negroes and that it was all a big mistake. And it's quite foolish. And it's a black superiority crazy type thing that's going out. And we're just going on to part 6 of this. This is LeBron man, where of course he doesn't even look like an albino. And they say that he probably had a little more olive skin. And of course black people started freaking out going, yeah, he's black. And you can tell by looking at this guy that looks like the man off 300 if you were to shave him a little bit, that he doesn't have any affinity really. But they try desperately to attach themselves to white people, and somehow, in fact, his statement here is the silly forensic that the albinos came up with to show us what LeBron man might have looked like. Please note that it looks quite different from the Kostinki 14 and Sunghir busts, which were more serious, less racist attempts at truthful depictions of ancient black people, like I showed you in the last one. And so here we see a bust of a thought of what Kostinki man might look like, and of course they gave him a little bit of a wild or older man type look, or a caveman thing, and sure, he does look different than the other guy. So we have the man from 300, but we're also looking at a spray of quite a few thousand years here, some 40,000 years of difference in evolution in them. But they want you to believe that maybe we had a little more caveman appearance, so they keep throwing out these older ones, and this looks like Lou Ferrigno of the Hulk. And so this is a forensic bust of Kostinki 14, a.k.a. Markina Gora man. Skeleton was dated to 36,200 to 38,700 years ago. So about 30,000 years difference, really, making it the second oldest modern human whose whole genome has been sequenced. Y-DNA-C, mDNA-U, genome sequences of a 45,000-year-old modern human from western Siberia. And that's as of October 2014. But there's been other finds since then that don't actually overdate this, but things like Dracopithecus furburgi, and which we find now is a variant and slight variant of Organopithecus macedoniensis, and that is the primitive hominid form that caused the Caucasians to form, and indeed all homos on the planet. And it seems like it's a in and out of Africa, not an out of Africa thing. For a while they were looking at it as being a out and in out, in out. Now it looks like it was an out in out, in out. But still almost the same type thing. As we get better and better at this, we learn more and more about it. Kostinki man, I'll read this all to you here, and I'm sorry, but it says European genetic identity may stretch back to 36,000 years. So carrying Europeans, these Caucasians that they try to say are albinos. So we can see way back here that he's a liar, and he's showing it on his own site. Let me see if I can just get in on this paper a little bit better here, maybe, and it'll be a little easier to see for you. See if I can get that lined up just a little better. Anyhow, Europeans carry a motley mix of genes from at least 3 different ancient sources, it says. And of course, this is trying to give you some type of sense of non-homogeneous later people that we are. But let's just continue. He says the 3 are indigenous hunter-gatherers within Europe, people from the Middle East, and Northwest Asians, or people that were in that area, from near the Great Steppe of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. One high-profile recent study suggests that genetic component entered Europe by way of a separate migration, and that they only came together in most Europeans in the past 5,000 years. That's not true, it contradicts itself. But now ancient that's what he's showing. And now ancient DNA from the fossilized skeleton of a short, dark-skinned, dark-eyed man, dark-skinned? No, tanned? Olive, maybe? No, he's got to try to say that they were black by throwing that out there. But they lived at least 36,000 years ago along the Middle Don River, way up in Russian steppes. Presents a different view. This young man had DNA from all 3 of those migratory groups, and so was already pure European. Won't know for his dreams, but he's got it on his page. Says the evolutionary biologist Eske Willerslev of the Natural History Museum of Denmark at the University of Copenhagen, who led the analysis. In challenging the multiple migration model, the new genome data published online today in Science suggests that Europeans today are the descendants of a very old, interconnected population of hunter-gatherers that had already spread throughout Europe, as much of Central and Western Asia, by 36,000 years ago, at the time of Cro-Magnon and things. So at that time, we were pretty much homogeneous with a variation on a theme. And of course, certain people and genetic things that are happening in this area that aren't in this area slowly make slight variations on a theme, and then they keep getting back together, and these variations that do get together, and then the ones that didn't, and then later some that do and then didn't, has developed the slight variations that we have on all these people. But none of them are albinos. Although we can have albinos, Negroes have more, and it's really a genetic defect and has nothing to do with the way that Caucasians look. For the Swedish bikini team gets quite tanned, and there aren't any albinos, but he can't keep from trying to do something. So let's continue here. In challenging the multiple migration model, the new genome data published online today suggests that Europeans today are descendants of very old interconnection guys from 36,000 years ago. What is surprising is this guy represents one of the earliest Europeans, but at the same time, he basically contains all of the genetic components that you'll find in contemporary Europeans at 37,000 years ago. So really, we've been a static model from that point, and just having that variation on a theme that I'm talking about. And of course, as that develops, people keep passing back and forth information in a sharing way, and in doing so, it developed better and better technologies, and what do you know and what do I know, which of course at first meetings are always going to be something like, oh, it's my secret, I'll make money off of it. Eventually that disperses away. Kind of like now, the Caucasians in America developed airplane flight. Well, we've got everybody doing it. Everybody's flying back and forth. There's no country we're trying to keep from it or charge somebody a big amount so you can get on our plane. Caucasians are the ones that share all this technology, and they go around and do it. And these are these early step people that had done so. So the Europeans, the origins of Europeans used to seem straightforward. The first modern humans moved into Europe 42 to 45,000 years ago, perhaps occasionally meeting the Neanderthals and ancestors who had inhabited Europe for at least 400,000 years. Then, starting 10,000 years ago, farmers came from the Middle East and spread rapidly through Europe. So right at the end of the last ice age and the Younger Dryas event and the things that changed all that. As researchers recently sequenced the genomes of more than a dozen ancient members of our species, Homo sapiens, in Europe and Asia in rapid succession, they added a third genetic component, a ghost lineage of nomads who blew into northeast Europe from the steppes of Western Asia about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Something that we didn't know before, and this is what I've been talking about lately. These are your proto Indo Europeans, the same people, your cousin, your granddad's brother, and that had over time changed slightly and then whipped back in, but they can see the slight variation on the theme of that. That's how precise they're getting in all of this. To explore European ancestry further, Willeslev's team extracted DNA from ulna, or the lower arm bone, it's one of your arm bones, of a skeleton of a young man discovered in 1954 at Kostinki 14 site, one of more than 20 archaeological sites at Kostinki Barshkevo. This area in southwest Russia was crossroads of the boundary of Eastern Europe and Western Asia, and was famous for its carved Venus figures of their women, who again have that healthy womanly appearance to them, large breasts and so on, and it's a matriarchal thing and also a fertility symbol and so on. Along with these, they are found these skinny, more frail, princess-looking girls, but then there's also the Mother of Heaven, the Venus type statue, and then the things that come out of that eventually, and the fertility that go all the way through the Greeks and even into nowadays, but kind of disgustingly in the last couple of 100 years at most, or even way shorter than that in reality, we've gone to this waif look, and women yearn to look like a young girl again instead of looking like a woman. which when they were a girl, they wanted to look like a woman. Now we've got it twisted around backwards. You can look at the pompous dresses and the big butts on the women and the way they set them and everything, and that they were supposed to have looked like that, and the push-up chest bras and all that type thing, that at some time here not too long ago, women were supposed to have had that. Then they started corseting and pinching in, and it modded and changed. And really after like Twiggy and stuff, models were supposed to be, hey, even if you're 35 and have 3 kids, you're supposed to look like a waif, which is really a non-realistic model for anybody. But let's get off of that. Willistar extracted 13 samples of DNA from the arm bone, and his graduate student Andeline Seguin Orlando and other lab members sequenced the ancient genome to final coverage of 2.42 times, which is relatively low and means that on average each nucleotide site was read 2.4 times. So it did sequence, but it's not like it rapid replicate, if I understand genetics and what they're trying to say here. He also had about 1% more Neanderthal DNA than do Europeans and Asians today. 1%. So you can see this slight, maybe he didn't get as much pulled into it. Anyhow, in confirming one another, even older human from Siberia had shown that humans and Neanderthals had actually mixed early, before 45,000 years ago, perhaps in the Middle East. And I think we always really had this model and this idea going on. And looking at ancient skeletons and now finding the genome and partial Neanderthal DNA in them, we realize that there are people that did and didn't from around 40 to 65, 70,000 years. And it seems like there's actually a connection before that time, because the genomes don't set right. And people have started noticing this, and I've seen it in a few papers whenever they really go into depth in these lines and linear sections of genomes, that some of them seem to go from way back when, and or we have a common ancestor that is so common that we both have the same traits pulled into the same logistic area of the genome, if you're following me. Anyhow, that's another theory, and a lot of this is theoretical, of course, but it does make a lot of sense. Willerstuff says that data suggests the following scenario. After modern humans spread out of Africa about 60,000 years ago, they encountered Neanderthals and inbred with them, perhaps in the Middle East. Then while one branch headed east towards Melanesia and Australia, another branch of this founder population, sometimes called basal Eurasians, spread north and west into Europe and Central Asia. There was really a large Met population that probably stretched all the way into the Middle East, up into Europe, and all the way into Eurasia. Willerslev says, these people interbred at the edges of their separate populations, keeping the entire complex network interconnected, and so giving the ancient Kostiki man genes from 3 different groups. In principle, you just have to have sex with your neighbor and they have it with their next neighbor. You don't need to have these armies of people moving around to spread these genes, but you do have to have a little bit of migration, and you do have to have a little bit of people staying still and other people migrating into that area. And you would probably think that this is done by seasonal thing and trades. And seasonal things and trades go together. And after a few years of knowing, when I show up here, they really like this, you start making a bunch of those baskets before you get there, so you can get there and then have a lot of trade with them and the niceties that go along with it and so on. And it's quite easily possible that back then, like much later, we positively know, they traded away their princess daughters and so on like that to people to help even balance genomes, to give more of a gene pool, to give things to show that they are your cousin, you know, and things. So it's kind of an important thing that may show up because of that, and maybe a reason to show that even though back then they didn't war with you because you've got thicker eyebrows, they were your friend. Not in all cases, though. Later, this large population was pushed back towards Europe as later waves of settlers, such as the ancestors of the Han Chinese, moved into Eastern Asia. The Kostinki man does not share DNA with Eastern Asians, who gave rise to the Paleo-Indians in the America. But then there's also, we do have the new video I just showed here with a new skeleton they found that predates all of this they're talking about coming into the Americas across the Bering or Ice Age, and they are showing European and these people that he's talking about, not necessarily a Mongol Asian type people and Inuit type people that you would commonly think but that these were more of a Caucasoid type people, and showing that they have a lot of connections to the proto Indo Europeans that we keep talking about. Other researchers say that this new genome is important because it's the first paper document of some degree of continuity among the first people to get to Europe and the people living there today, says population geneticist David Reich of Harvard University, one of the authors of the triple migration model. Also, it's a striking finding that the Kostinki 14 genome already has 3 major European components present that we detect in modern Europeans, says Johannes Krauss of the University of Tübingen in Germany. And so these people that are working on this were quite famous, and they are very famous now and of the leading edge of people in genetics. But even if the man from Kostinki in Russia had all 3 of these elements 36,000 years ago, that doesn't mean that other Europeans did, Reich says. His team's DNA data and models suggest that Europeans in the West and North did not pick up DNA from the steppes until much later. And that's kind of what I've been showing you in those other videos that we were doing recently. He and Krauss also think that Willerslev study shows to be confirmed with higher resolution sequencing to rule out contamination and to have been more population genetics modeling explaining the distribution of these genetic types. The bottom line, researchers agree, is that European origins seem to be much more complex than most people thought originally, Willerslev says, and that's in this article here. And it may be, European genetic identity stretches back 36,000 years. And we had up until recently thought that it must have happened after the Ice Age, and once it came through a warming trend and people came into the area, and then there were endemics that were there when other people migrated in as they came up out of the more Mediterranean area, which was starting to become arid and slowly turning into a wasteland, which it kind of has developed into today. Ust Ishim, the oldest genome sequence, reveals Neanderthal mixing, and Ust Ishim is way up here in like a Russian steppes, and it almost has that name Utnapishtim. But anyhow, Denisova, they're saying is 50,000 years here too, and I recently showed you a paper where they have found a Denisovan in that Denisova cave that dates 100,000 years prior to that, and it really goes around 150. Here's where they're showing the Malta at. They're not talking about the little island right there, Malta, but over here. This also shows you that these Proto-Indo-Europeans, ancient languages, all hook up and hook up together. There's a place called Vindhya here that's 3,000 years old, and Vindhya is the current name of this place, but you would think that that would be a place over in India, but no, it's not. It's not. But it does have things to do with Vineland, and things like that. So then we also have Mezmaishka, which is 60,000 years ago, showing right here in the middle of Anatolia, which helped to do a spread down through and up. And El Sidron, way over here, 49,000 years ago, over here in Iberia, and its connections, and how there's more of the red people through here and these yellow people, and he has a blue mix with him being the Denisovan, and then there's mixes that come off that, and the fact that Denisovans are really large component Caucasians with the Denisovan blend, leading you to have the India people that are here, and a lot of the islanders that have a separate mix. And that mix is not from Negroids. They were really only from this little portion over here in West Africa at one time. Now, using remarkably well-preserved DNA extracted from fossil thigh bones, researchers have sequenced the genome of a 45,000-year-old anatomically modern human, the oldest complete Homo sapiens genome on record. The work published in Nature this week reveals fragments of Neanderthal DNA and helps pinpoint when they interbred with our direct ancestors. Of course, we look at him, and it really looks like a Chuck Norris kind of guy and stuff, and so it's kind of like, Chuck Norris gets with Batman, or whatever way you want to look at it, and so you end up with that effect. But in 2008, a relatively complete left femur from an adult male was discovered on the banks of the river Irtysh near the settlements of Ust Ishim in western Siberia, again, up there. A large international team led by Harvard and Max Planck researchers retrieved, sequenced, and analyzed this genome which represents the oldest directly radiocarbon dated modern human outside of Africa and the Middle East. His diet consisted mostly of plants or plant-eating fish, and his genetic code suggests that he has no living descendants today. Ust Ishim referred to be Y-DNA haplogroup K times XLT and mDNA R. Now, haplogroup K2, formerly known as KXLT, also has M526 and MNOPS. A haplogroup NO K2A includes most males among Southeast Asians, East Asians, and Finno-Ugaritic populations. Look at that variant. These descendants of K2B include the major haplogroups M, S, P, Q, and R. These are now numerically dominant in the Oceania, Central Asia, Siberian, among Native American populations, the Amerindians, Europe, and South Asia. So there's a component that connects all of these Caucasians. And of course, you know that Asians and Caucasian, it's Asian, Caucasian, it's there, and Mongoloid is a variation on a theme of that. None of this has to do with Negroids. None of this is showing any Negroid DNA or genetics through any of it whatsoever. But again, I have to tell you, we're on a site that's telling you that these are all albino Negroes doing all this stuff. Ust Ishim man is more related to people living outside of Africa today than to Africans, making him a member of one of the most ancient non-African populations. They also compare him to other ancient skeletons, a 24,000-year-old boy from Malta in Siberia, and an 8,000-year-old man from Labrana. Of course, there's a large difference between somebody being 38, 24, and only 8,000 years, and you can see the variation and how it looks a little more modern as it's going on and on. But science reports and found that he is equally related to both. That means he lived just before or around the time human populations in Western and Eurasia split from each other. And so it seems that we have a definite connective tissue there on all these Caucasian Europeans and Eurasians, or proto Indo Europeans, if we look at the later statement of what they are. The ancient Siberian was related equally to West European hunter-gatherers. His comment is here, the Khoisan like Grimaldi man. My comment is no. North Asian hunter-gatherers comment Sunghir and Malta people. My comment is yes. East Asians comment Jamon and Pur Anu, not Chinese, and my comment is yes, Caucasoids. And the indigenous people of the Andaman Islands of South Asia, Harvard Kwame Fu tells the Harvard Gazette. And I'm saying, no, they have a connection to the Denisovan thing there. And you can look at these boys here and how they're all looking, and you can see the genetic phenotype on them. You can also see they look exactly alike almost. Now, they are probably siblings in some way, and, oh wait, I think the ones with the bands on are boys, because that's a girl because she's gotten boobies or she's a little older. And, oh no, it says Andaman Island girls. I'm sorry, they're all females. So you can see the connection and how they have a common look. And certain female groups, I guess this is even better, the female groups have a more common look like this. Male groups will look slightly different. You can see that. You can really see it in like the Aborigines of Australia, where there's just a select set of facial characteristics that keep getting carried on through from each one, males and females, and you can see that with the widened shapes of facial features and things like that. But Malta shows a Caucasoid, thin-nosed, with a mustache, long-haired, ivory Venus statue that's not really stylopegic in any way, but just kind of that healthy, womanly figure at this point, not one of those extremely fat ones that we see, or even exposing genitalia or anything like that, and that's at 25,000 BC, and then they try to compare that to a stetopigic Andamanese mother here, and you can see how the kid can even just stand on her butt. I mean, it's like her hip has gotten kicked out, and so her butt, instead of aiming out, aims up, and the haunch gets on top. And of course it's exaggerated because of a genetic thing, and causes them to look very much like that. My grandma pretty much had this effect, but she wasn't steatopegic. But yeah, and that didn't carry on to any of our children that we can find through, I think it's some 32 that spawned off of grandma and granddad that have all come through, and none of them really contain that steatopegic look or anything like she eventually developed and everything. But anyhow, among present-day populations, however, he's closely related to East Asians than to Europeans, suggesting that Europeans today inherited some of their genes from a different unknown source, likely a population that left Africa in a later wave. And so, yeah, the endemic North Africans and Egyptians and stuff, and we've talked about that fact too a long time ago, and even again recently. Neanderthals were present in Eurasia while he was alive, and sure enough, he carried a similar level of Neanderthal ancestry as present-day Europeans and Asians do. 2.3% of his genome, so that's not really a lot, but just about everyone living outside of Africa today can carry between 1.7 and 2.1% Neanderthal DNA. But because the segments in the Ust Ishim man are much longer, Neanderthal gene flow into his ancestor must have occurred 7,000 to 13,000 years before this time and been locked in on him, and he didn't have the deviation. This means his ancestors mixed with Neanderthals about 50 to 60,000 years ago, which is close to the time of the major expansion of modern humans out of Africa and the Middle East. Janet Kelso of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology says in a news release. Previous estimates of the timing of interbreeding between modern humans and Neanderthals range wildly from 37 to 86,000 years ago, like I was talking about earlier. This newspaper definitively says that it was modern humans with modern human behavior that interbred with Neanderthals, Harvard's David Reich tells New Scientist. And I don't know if he's trying to point that out or make sure that's in there because, oh my God, cavemen were having sex with cavemen. Anyhow, they're cousins. Oh no. Well, and it's not cousins. Anyhow. Furthermore, by measuring with the number of mutations passing in this individual and comparing them with people now, the team found that between 1 and 2 mutations per year have accumulated in the genomes of Europeans and Asian populations since the Ust Ishim man lived. This slow mutation rate might push back the human Neanderthal split by hundreds of thousands of years. And wow, that actually kind of confirms what I was telling you a moment ago about an earlier date of commonality that they see, because they're seeing all this stripped apart and they go, well, there's still some here. And it must have come from a long time ago then. So it makes sense. The Sunghir site in Russia, and you're not going to be able to tell that man that he's black. 26,000 years ago BC, discovered during clay extraction operations in 1956, was excavated by Otto Bader from 1956 to 1977. The excavations were reopened by Bader's assistant Ludmila Makola and Bader's son Nikolai in 1986 and continue to today. Sunghir is an enormously early Upper Paleolithic living site located on the outskirts of the city of Vladimir, 192 kilometers from Moscow in the Russian Republic. While inhabiting Sunghir, the last 5 of these sites' occupants perished. According to Russian physical anthropologists, these consisted of a 60-year-old man, a 7 to 9-year-old girl, and a 13-year-old boy, an unsexed headless adult of an adult female skull. The 2 adolescents of the adult male were buried in 2 shallow graves 3 meters apart, dug into the permafrost beneath the living surface of the site. All 3 of the corpses were laid on their backs with their hands folded across their pelvises. The 4th individual was represented by an isolated and poorly preserved female skull placed beside a stone slab in an area stained with red ochre. So here we have that confirmation of the red ochre burials again, of course. And it was found overlying the man's burial. Dun, 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 dun. A person sacrificed to serve as a protector in the afterlife, perhaps. The 5th skeleton, that of a headless adult, was also poorly preserved as to be practically unrecoverable. It was found immediately on top of the two adolescents, a person sacrificed to serve as a protector in the afterlife for them, maybe even perhaps, who were buried together in a head-to-head fashion in the middle of an apparently abandoned circular dwelling structure. Each of the three intact individuals were lavishly decorated with thousands of painstakingly parried ivory beads arranged in dozens of strands, perhaps basted to their own clothing. Although it was almost certain that the three individuals buried intact at Sunghir were members of the same social group, there were remarkable differences among them in details of body decorations and grave offerings. People were slightly different stuff today. It wouldn't have been a clone situation. Anyhow, the man was adorned with 2,936 beads and fragments arranged in strands found on all parts of his body, including his head, which was apparently covered with a beaded cap that also bore several fox teeth inside of it. So he was well adorned and stuff, and you can see this. It's neat they've gone through all this trouble here. His forearms and biceps were each decorated with a series of polished mammoth ivory bracelets, 25 of them in all, some showing traces of black paint, striping. They were thin, flat strips of mammoth ivory cut longitudinally along the tusk, shaved through the tusk. They believe that they must have boiled this for days and then shaved it off with a piece of obsidian. It's just thoughts, though. But they were pierced at each end, some with one hole, others with two, apparently to keep the ivory bent into a circle. What appears to be a brush strokes from the application of pigment are visible on at least one specimen. Around the man's neck, he wore a small, flat schist pendant. So schist is a crystalline type of rock, painted red, but with a small black dot on one side. That's the eye of Sauron. No. In the book The Mind in the Cave, David Lewis Williams cites Sunghir as the evidence that humanity's natural state is subject to a ruler. He cites that one of the cognitive advantages we enjoyed over Neanderthals, leading to our success and their failure, was this fact that we would have a ruler, and maybe they didn't really do that. They kind of had groups, but nobody was running it. But if the human condition is so amenable to rulership, why is the ruler burial at Sunghir so exceptional? Why have we not found more burials like it? Well, they just haven't been able to find it. We're on the cutting edge, that's what I would say. But then how many of them are there going to be? I don't know. If you found every single one of them, there'd be thousands, I'm sure of it. But would you ever know? Would people walk right across them day after day after day, not having a single clue that they're there? Would kids play on an Indian burial mound, having no idea what the hell it was, and one day playing trucks, find a few arrowheads, start digging into it, and find a human hand, and next thing you know, they call people in and freak out, and then, hell, it was just some kids playing tackle a man with a ball or something, or Tonka trucks. So, yeah, things come like that. We're about to end this one here. I'm going to try to get through this before we hit the next. But we are on 6. The site of Malta, Siberia, Russia. The vast territory of North and Central Asia represents a poorly understood region in the prehistoric era. Despite extensive excavations that have been conducted during the past century, the earliest human occupations in this region probably began sometime around 40,000 years ago. Small groups of big game hunters likely migrated into this region as a result of the second out of Africa migration, or a bounce. They confronted a harsh climate and long dry winters. By about 20,000 BC, two principal cultural traditions had developed in Siberia and northeastern Asia: the Malta and the Afrontova Gora Oshirkovo cultures. I'm sure I'm botching that. The Malta tradition is known from a vast area spanning west of Lake Baikal, which is the largest lake in the world, and it even has sponges and things in it. It's neat. I want to do one just on that, knowing my marine background and things too. It's near the Yenisei River. The site of Malta, for which the culture is named, is comprised of a series of subterranean houses made up of large animal bones and reindeer antlers. So it's pretty cool. It's kind of like that D&D thing I was showing you, where they had taken and made structures out of that. which had likely been covered with animal skins and sod to protect inhabitants from the severe prevailing northerly winds. Among the artistic accomplishments evident at Malta are the remains of early carved bone, ivory, and antler objects. Figures of birds and human females are the most commonly found items. It should be noted that the Malta culture may more correctly be associated with the eastward second wave of migration of southern Africa that occurred about 50 to 55,000 BC. However, lacking similar type figures from China, we associate the Malta culture with the Grimaldi. He's saying that there, but no, we're not associating with Grimaldi. We're not associating anybody else with that. We're not associating that with black people either, but he desperately wants to keep trying to throw that one guy's name in there. Pardon me, let me get a drink. It should be noted that the Malta culture may be correctly associated with that eastward connection, and that the Paleolithic art of Europe and Asia falls into two broad categories: mural art and portable art. Mural art is concentrated in southwestern France, Spain, and northern Italy. A lot of cave art and things too. The tradition of portable art, predominantly carvings in ivory and antler, spans the distance across Western Europe and into North and Central Asia. It suggested that the broad territory in which the tradition of carving and imagery is shared is evidence of cultural contact and common religious beliefs. Some of the most well-known examples of the so-called Venus figurines are found there. Now, this shows you a continuity of people, but then we too today have portable art, and you might end up carving something on a wall, but you can't take it with you. One such figurine, illustrated here on the left, is from the site of Malta and dates around 22,000 BC. It's carved from the ivory of a mammoth, an extinct type of elephant highly prized during hunting migrated during the herds and chasing them across the Ice Age tundra of Europe and Asia. Like most Paleolithic figurine carvings, the image is carved in the round and highly stylized manner. Typically, there are exaggerated characteristics such as breast and buttocks, which may have been symbols of fertility and womanship. And now we're going to get into this, and it's a black man that's a descendant of things, so I think we're going to stop it here and kick it on the next one, because we've gotten to close to 40 minutes on this. Again, this is part 6, and part 7 is coming in your up left-hand corner here as soon as I get it done. Peace.